Commander Riker teaches Data how to whistle. Armis kills Tasha Yar. And Dr. Pulaski can't save Deanna Troy's child. Hello, everybody, and welcome to The Seventh Rule with Cirroc Lofton.
Hello, hello.
My name is Ryan T. Husk, and today we're doing a review of, well, an episode that covers all of those things. It is TNG's Season 2, Episode 22, Shades of Grey, story by Maurice Hurley, teleplay by Maurice Hurley and Richard Manning and Hans Beimler, directed by Rob Bowman. This was July 15th, 1989. Where were you? We've got a very special guest, everybody. Can you believe it? This is going to be a good one. We've got Eric Stillwell joining us all the way from France. What's up, Eric? How are you today?
Hey, it's great to be with you.
Awesome to have you. Also, everybody, very quickly, we do have a very special thanks to give out to Michael C. Bazarewski. Thank you very much, Michael C. Bazarewski, for sponsoring this episode. This guy gets it. We appreciate you. Well, let's just get into it. What's up, Cirroc?
Oh, final episode here.
This is it.
Of this season. And I got a whole bunch of flashback sequences, which is something that I kind of like a lot. But yeah, Eric, this is it, man. Oh, sorry. Yeah, this is the season finale. I really have a big question about, for one, this is the 22nd episode, not the 26th, which we would usually expect by now. So this was a shortened season due to the strike that happened, and a little insight on just the kind of problems you ran into because of the strike. I would like to kind of start there.
Well, the season obviously started late because the writer's strike happened at the end of the first season and prolonged the hiatus that we didn't have long hiatuses back then because 26 episodes pretty much took up the full year. But so we did start late on season 2, so we were going to be short 4 episodes to begin with. And then, of course, the studio was hyper focused on budgets. So by the end of the season, they had already spent too much money and the studio wanted to do a clip show. And ironically, it could have been a cliffhanger since Riker was on the verge of death.
Can you imagine if they did? They made a cliffhanger, and then season 3, episode 1 was another clip show. They'd be like, "Oh man, we got you guys so good." But Eric, can you tell us how you originally got the gig to work on Star Trek? Were you a big fan beforehand, and it was just everything you've ever wanted, or did you get stuck with it and you're like, "I don't like Star Trek"? And what was that job?
I was a huge Star Trek fan from my childhood. I think as early as 9, I started watching reruns of the original series in the early 1970s. I was only 3 when the original series started, but by the early 70s, I was old enough to appreciate it. A friend of mine introduced me to it, and I became a huge fan. And even when the local station, I lived in Idaho because my dad was in the Air Force. We were stationed at Mountain Home Air Force Base. And the local station in Boise took the show off the air for the summer and put Perry Mason reruns on. So my friends and I started a signature campaign and sent a petition into the TV station, and they promised us they would bring it back in the fall, which they did. And they also sent me some pretty cool, black and white PR photos of Kirk and Spock. So I was a huge fan. And by the late 70s, I was involved in Star Trek fandom. And I was involved with the International Star Trek Club called Starfleet. And I became the president of the organization.
Wow.
And it kind of grew like really exponentially in the early 80s because of the movies coming out. So that's how I originally had some contacts at the studio, because Gene Roddenberry and his assistant Susan were honorary members of the club. And when I found out that they were going to do Next Generation, I immediately sent in my resume. I worked on this one TV production filmed up in Oregon, which was called Promise, with James Garner and James Woods, and it was a Hallmark Hall of Fame TV movie, which ended up winning the most awards ever in the history of television for a TV movie. It also had Piper Laurie in it, who recently passed away, and she won an Emmy for that TV movie, and it won a Humanitas Award and all sorts of awards, Emmys up to wazoo. So anyway, I had this resume with just that one project on it, and I sent it in to Susan Sackett, who passed it along to Eddie Milkus, who passed it along to Bob Justman, and eventually I got called in for an interview. But I didn't get the job from the interview because they ended up
plot twist.
Well, they hired two people who had already worked at the studio in some capacity, like mailroom or tour guide, whatever. So I thought, well, then I'm going to go to Hollywood and get a job as a tour guide at Paramount Pictures. And so I did. And then a couple of months later, one of the original PAs got promoted, David Takamura. He got promoted to post-production. And I had run into Bob Justman at the first screening of the pilot episode, Encounter at Farpoint, which they had screened for the cast and crew at one of the theaters on the lot. And Bob saw, I was hired by I was a tour guide at the studio, and my boss had asked me one day if I wanted to do door duty at this screening that they were doing for Star Trek. I'm like, sure. Because the cool thing was, after you check everyone into the theater, you can stay and watch it. So I got to see the pilot episode along with the cast and crew, and Bob Justman remembered me, and literally like a day or two days later, he called me and said, "Are you still interested in working on Star Trek? Because we have an opening." And I went into his office, and I actually said something, the dumbest thing I've ever said in my life. I thought, well, normally, we're supposed to give like 2 weeks notice if you're going to quit your job. And Bob yelled out to his assistant, Carol Eisner, he's like, "Carol, bring in the stack of resumes for this position." And it was like, 2 feet thick. And he's like, "If you don't want the job, there's a lot." I'm like, "Okay, I'm ready. Start tomorrow, 6 a.m.
That's hilarious.
Wow.
I was a production assistant for the first 2 seasons, and towards the end of the second season, I don't remember exactly when, but I became the script coordinator for the series.
So, first of all, I have to admire your determination there, Eric, because you literally took a gamble and said, "I'm going to pick up and move to Hollywood and just try to get a job as a tour guide to hopefully one day get in at Star Trek." So that was a total gamble, as much as you can probably gamble in life.
It's pretty unbelievable, yeah.
And how great is it that it actually worked too?
It did.
You made it happen.
I have to admire that.
I still pinch myself when I think back, because it just seems almost impossible that would happen.
So,
wow.
Fast forward a bit, you're working on the show for a couple years. Then, towards the end of the second year, somebody taps on your shoulder and says, "Hey, Eric, I got a job for you. I hope you don't have any weekend plans." Or what? How did that go? What was the job?
I was trying to remember exactly who it was, if it was Maurice Hurley or if it was Rick Berman. I think it was Rick Berman, because he had very specific assignment for me. It was the last episode. They were doing this clip show. It was Maurice Hurley's last episode before he left, and he had written this basically skeleton outline for the show that I guess originally Rob Bowman thought he was going to have 5 days instead of the normal 7 days to shoot this outline, but they only gave him 3 days to do it to save money. And so Rick Berman said, we need to fill a bunch of gaps with clips from the first 47 episodes. Believe it or not, 47 is always showing up in Star Trek.
Yes, it is.
There were 47 episodes prior to Shades of Grey. So I had to literally go to an edit bay over in the post-production department with a library of 47 episodes of Next Generation on 3/4 VHS tape. And I had to screen all of the episodes, create basically a catalog of scenes that could be memories that Riker would have. So it was mostly Riker scenes from all the different episodes. And I had to go through and then also categorize them into like certain types of emotion, like fear, anger, love, sexuality, whatever category it would fall into. And that project took me 80 hours in 1 week, in 5 days, basically, 80 hours. And it was exhausting. But Rick wanted to have all these clips because I had to basically list the time code of each scene from each episode and where it started, where it ended. So he could just go and look at these scenes and then pick the ones that they wanted to use as Riker's dreams during the sequences that are used in the episode. But that was a pretty overwhelming assignment, but I managed to pull it off.
Wow. Yeah, I bet you wish you had like a Blu-ray player or some kind of Paramount Plus account. Would have really helped
that's what I was thinking.
But so you bring up a lot of things, and these names kind of float around, and we've been watching this show now for 2 seasons, and some of the names that keep popping up are, for us, Maurice Hurley and Rob Bowman, and you brought up the fact that Maurice was his kind of last hoorah for the Next Generation. Can you give us a little bit about Maurice Hurley and just give us some insight about his character, about his work ethic, or just whatever offhand stories you might have? And also, Rob Bowman is somebody that we want to pry into because a lot of his directing style has become really a signature storytelling for Next Generation, and we've been real fans of his throughout the course of watching this first 2 seasons. So just a little insight on how those men work and the kind of passion that they have for the show.
Well, Rob Bowman was one of the youngest directors that they had used on the show, and he was very friendly, nice, easygoing guy. I was a production assistant during most of that time, but I was assigned mostly to working with the writing staff over in the Hart building. Back in the day, in the first season, we were actually in a trailer in the middle of the back lot. Trailer, okay. I think it was trailer 24. So that's where I was stationed for my little errands all over the lot all the time. So I didn't get to really spend that much time with Bob or Rob Bowman, but I remember getting his lunch a few times. That was one of my jobs. And then Maurice...
Oh, that's better than eating his lunch.
They called him Rob Chicken Salad Bowman.
And Maurice Hurley was the showrunner, head writer, basically, Gene Roddenberry at the time. And I had more interactions with him because one of the ones I most distinctly remember was at the end of the first season, right before when the writer's strike was starting up. They weren't supposed to be writing. And they were doing the Neutral Zone, which was this episode with some Romulan characters. And I remember Maurice Hurley coming into the production trailer, and he basically did stand over my shoulder, and he's like, "Eric, I have an assignment for you. I need some names for some Romulan characters." But they all knew I was a Star Trek fan, so it was like they would come and ask me these crazy questions, and he's like, "I need a name for a couple of Romulan characters in the script that we're doing." And I was so naive back then. I was like, well, what am I supposed to do? Just make up some names? He's like, no, look them up in a Romulan encyclopedia. So I got to make up the names for the 2 Romulans in the neutral zone, and so I think every now and then, they would ask me for these little Star Trek-ish things if they got stuck. And Morris was a nice guy, but I know that I don't think he was particularly happy. It wasn't easy working with Gene's notes on a lot of the scripts, because Gene had very specific ideas about how he wanted to do things in it, and so it wasn't like Maurice could just do anything he wanted. At one point in time, he wanted to buy a spec script that I wrote, and I had written it during the writer's strike when we were off for so many months. I had to go back to Oregon and stay with my parents until the strike was over, and then come back to Hollywood. And I wrote this spec script called Shattered Time, which was basically an analogy of sort of like the Star Wars weapon defense program that was going on back in the 80s. And Maurice liked the script, and he showed it to Sam Friedel, who was the production manager, and Sam loved it. And apparently he showed it to one of the studio executives, Tim Isofano, and they were all telling me how much they loved my script and they wanted to buy it. And I was thinking, oh my God, this is actually happening. And then, of course, Gene nixed it. He didn't like it.
Damn.
Which really sort of sucked, because Gene was always my idol as a kid growing up, and because he was the creator of Star Trek, and then he was the one who put the silver bullet through my heart.
But there is a happy ending to the story. Everybody at home, Eric did sell 2 story ideas, one to Next Generation and one to Voyager. I think Voyager one maybe was like first season, 9th episode, right around there.
Yeah.
And the Next Generation one that he did pitch that did well was yesterday's Enterprise, which is a very beloved episode coming up in the 3rd season. So there's definitely a happy ending there. Eric, can you tell us, though, a regular day on the set of Star Trek or in the back lot of Paramount, say season 2, and was there ever a moment where you actually walked onto the bridge of the Enterprise and thought, wow, this is it. I'm actually here on this bridge?
Well, as a production assistant, my primary role was delivering memos and script revisions to studio executives and to the set and whatever department. So I had a bike, and there was only one other production assistant, Heidi, who was a friend of mine, also from Oregon. And we ran all around the lot delivering stuff day in and day out. Some of the weird highlights of being a production assistant was I also had to go collect petty cash envelopes for the actors from the studio cashier's office, and Marina was one of the ones who got petty cash because they would get like facials and stuff on the weekends because of all the makeup and everything.
Right.
And she'd always be like, Eric, where's my petty cash? I was always terrified of Marina, because she was always, the only reason she was ever looking for me was she wanted her petty cash. So and I would pick up lunches, deliver lunches. So as one of the 2 PAs, I sort of started focusing more on running errands for the writing department, because the other PA wanted to do more set stuff and makeup and hair and wardrobe and all that. So I did a lot of work with running the scripts back and forth to the print shop. I mean, it's so weird talking about it now, because now the print shop probably doesn't even exist because everything's just emailed out to people. But
right.
Back then, we actually had physical hard copies of every script and all the different colored revisions and pages constantly going back and forth. And so that's how I became more involved with the writing staff. And eventually, one of the the script coordinator who was assigned to the show had gone on a medical leave of absence, and she just never came back, and we never heard from her. Nobody knew what happened to her.
Wow.
And the woman who was basically the script typist who was doing the job for quite a while, a shelf fell on her face. Just a shelf that was above her typewriter just fell down one day and broke her nose, and she had to leave, and she was hospitalized for a while, and and suddenly I was thrust into like doing the script coordinator's job and keeping that department running. And by the beginning of the third season, I had actually been given the job of script coordinator. And Maurice Hurley had left. And before Michael Piller started, they had another showrunner come in named Michael Wagner. And he was just overwhelmed with the job because there weren't any scripts. And he finally just quit. And Michael Piller was like the runner-up candidate, so they called him back in, and he eventually took the job. But during this gap between showrunners, I would be going over to Rick Berman's office every day and taking his script notes and going back and doing the changes and working with the script typist. And that's how I became the script coordinator on the show.
Wow, it's bedlam.
It was yeah. I mean, so many crazy things happened. Like in the first season, I started during the 13th episode of the first season, which is just around the time that the whole staff was changing because of the issues that happened with DC Fontana and you know, the original writing staff who were all going out the door, and I was coming in, and it was very political and weird feeling. So for me, I was kind of like thinking, I always dreamed of working on Star Trek, and you know, it's all about this great reality of people working together, and it was sort of like the whole opposite thing going on in real life. But on the days that I had to run stuff down to the set and visit the sets and go on the bridge, the thing that used to stop me in my tracks really was between the sound stages, you could look up in the hills and see the Hollywood sign, and I'd be like, wow, I can't believe I'm here in Hollywood, you know, running my ass off, but I have this like dream job, and it was pretty cool.
Wow.
Yeah, you know, Star Trek is really one of the few, if not the only, franchise that the fans of it are actually the ones that are writing the stories or helping to create these stories. You mentioned coming up with character names, and you know, you weren't even a writer at that point officially, and here you are being asked to give us some, you know, Romulan names. So, and we've seen this kind of thing happen over and over again, where people who are involved with the show are also fans, and then they end up becoming part of the tapestry. And I think that's one of the remarkable things of it. What are some of the, you know, the good memories that you had when you were on the show? Like, as far as what was the thing that you just couldn't believe that you were there seeing? Was it the set? Was it the bridge of the Enterprise? Or was it being in the back room discussions and seeing how, you know, the soup is made?
Well, it was always cool to be on the sets, because the sets were pretty amazing. I mean, especially Deep Space Nine, the sets were pretty mind-boggling, especially the promenade, because you feel like you're really on a space station.
Yes.
And on the Enterprise, especially in the corridors where you can't see the end or the beginning of, you feel like you're really on a spaceship. But so I loved all those things, but there was always a catch-22 to everything in my experience. Like, because I was a fan and people found out I was a Star Trek fan, people would always be coming up to me and asking me, how much could you get for this prop? I'm like, I don't know, really, honestly.
You're like, but I'll take it off your hands for $15 right now.
This was before eBay, everybody.
One time they were filming one of the movies the original cast movies. I think it was Star Trek V, and I heard a news report that the sets had been broken into, and someone stole the captain's chair from the original Enterprise set and some of the costumes. And then I found out that Harv Bennett's office had called Gene Roddenberry's office to find out if I still worked at the studio, like basically accusing me of being a suspect. Wow. It was always like that was disappointing to me because I loved Star Trek so much, but I would never steal anything or sell the props. And then when we did yesterday's Enterprise, I spent a little more time down on the sets because I wanted to watch them filming our episode, and the situation occurred on 10 Forward where Whoopi Goldberg wanted to change one of the lines in her dialogue, and someone said, "Oh, well, here's one of the writers," and I'm like, "Oh no,
nice!
Don't talk to me. Talk to Rick Berman. That on me. You got to talk to Rick Berman." So I was, polite and told her I would let the production office know that she wanted to talk to Rick about a line change. So I called David Livingston and I told him, and then the next thing I find out is Rick is furious because what is Eric Stillwell doing on the set? Why is he talking to Whoopi Goldberg? And then I just noticed that I've been banned from the set. And I'm like, why is this happening to me? I was doing everything right.
You're like, I love Star Trek. Why is Star Trek being mean to me?
And I was doing everything the way it should be. I was making sure that the message got passed along. I didn't promise to do anything for her. And anyway, it was always something, the ups and downs of it all. But the funny thing about
you were a scapegoat. You were a scapegoat in a lot of situations.
I mean, that's what PAs are a lot of times, though.
Well, I don't know, Cirroc, if you remember Richard Arnold.
I do.
He was jealous of any other fan who worked there, so he was always trying to undermine me and get me in trouble for stuff, and it was just so frustrating. And
the more things change, the more they stay the same with fandom around here, because the fans can be pretty cutthroat. Eric, we only have you for another minute here, but I think you're finishing up a thought there.
I wanted to say something about Shades of Grey because they asked me what should we call this episode, and I said I think we should call it Riker's Brain.
That's hilarious
because all the fans know that Spock's Brain is one of the most unpopular episodes, and we knew this clip show was going to be horrible. Although I did get my very first screen credit as a researcher at the end of the show. But they kind of found out about the Spock's Brain thing and said we can't call it Riker's Brain, and so I said, well, how about Shades of Grey, because there's no black and white to this episode. It's just this weird hodgepodge, and that's how it got the name.
And history was made. Well, Eric, this has been so much fun having you. Super excited that we got the chance to talk with you, and really appreciate that you took the time way out in France. It's like 2 a.m. for you practically over there. But anyway, we do hope to have you again soon sometime, Eric. Absolutely.
Yes. I've heard a lot of good things. I haven't seen it yet, but I've heard a lot of good things about that.
And tell Denise Crosby she's got to co-host that one.
All right.
Oh, we are harassing her. She's not going to get out of it. You watch. But anyway, thank you very much, Eric. We really appreciate you taking the time with us. It's been amazing meeting you. Everybody at home, stick around. We're going to cover this glorious episode a bit more on the other side. We'll be right back on The Seventh Rule. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to The Seventh Rule with Cirroc Lofton.
Hello, hello.
All right, here are the trivioids of the week, and they go a little something like this. Something jabbed Commander Riker in the calf. Dr. Pulaski is not a fan of comical transporter chiefs. The Enterprise is on a geological survey on Surya 4. Did I get that right? Commander Riker has been infected by an unidentified microbe. Commander Riker hopes they don't find out he's faking it. If you drop a hammer on your foot, it's hardly useful to get mad at the hammer. Commander Riker's great-grandfather once got bit by a rattlesnake. After 3 days of intense pain, the snake died. Doc, I think that's also what's that dude's? I can't think straight. What's that guy's name?
Which guy?
The karate guy, not the Bruce Lee guy, but the dude with the shaggy hair. I'll remember it in a second.
Okay. Not Chuck Norris?
Chuck Norris, thank you. It's a Chuck Norris joke is what that sounds like to me. Okay. Sorry, I got a pile driver next door that's breaking my brain. Continuing on, Dr. Pulaski wants 5 milligrams of tricordrazine handy. Commander Riker teaches Data how to whistle. Armus kills Tasha Yar, and Dr. Pulaski can't save Deanna Troy's child. All right, everybody, please make sure to like this video. Please subscribe to this channel. If you're listening in, leave us a 5-star rating and a nice review. We'd really appreciate it. If you're watching, go subscribe to us wherever podcasts are found. If you're listening, head over to YouTube and find us and subscribe to our channel. All right, let's get into this one, Cirroc. Finally, we've been talking about this episode for 2 full seasons because we cannot wait to know what you think about Shades of Grey. Best episode ever? What do you think?
Yeah, I don't know about best episode ever. It was a good episode. It was good. And moved along well. I thought Rob Bowman did one of his classic, directorial jobs of making the part that he was moving feel fluidic. He also does a great job of showing you the different sets. For example, the planet surface that they were on for the location, for the planetary location that they were on. So yeah, another hats off moment for Rob Bowman. I thought he just really set the tone for this whole really show in general, because the directing style has really become signature for what you want on these Next Generation episodes. But yeah, no, I really wish I could have asked Eric this question, because this was another question now that just came to mind after he's gone now. But when you have an episode with this many flashbacks and Eric's over there going through the archives of 47 episodes trying to find scenes, so none of that is written then. And I wonder what the actual script would look like for this episode. Was it only like 25 pages?
20 pages, yeah. And it's like, and then it's just a bunch of scribbles of like, Riker goes through negative emotions, or Riker goes through happy emotions.
Right. So I wonder, when you have that much flashback material, it felt like half of the episode was almost flashback. So you would expect that the script wasn't that long in this particular writing, in this version. So I wondered, what that looked like, since I'm sure Eric was handling the script for this episode as well. But, it started off really well. Right away got me intrigued, just there on the planet surface. Usually they start inside of the ship or something, but this time they started right on the planet surface. We don't know where they're at. We just know that they're doing some kind of, scientific exploration work or looking for something. So I like the start. I really like Dr. Pulaski in this episode. She's continuously being growing on me as a character. And there's just moments of subtle moments that I think she really shines at. She is very good at exuding senior officer vibes. And when she, for example, checks O'Brien in the opening credit when he's trying to make a little joke saying, I hope it's the right coordinates, and she gives him cuts a look at him. I really like the way she delivered her line about how not liking comical transporter chiefs or whatnot. I thought she maintains a level of professionalism, but also stern, like no nonsense. I don't play around in certain areas of discussion. In this particular one, where it comes to beaming and stuff, where she has an anxiety, she don't play, and I like that. She also uses that same level of authority when dealing with Picard, and I think she's one of the few people that is able to challenge Picard in an authoritative way that seems believable and genuine to me as well.
Mm-hmm. You know, full disclosure, I remember seeing this episode when I was a kid watching the reruns. And I remember thinking, this is the worst episode I've ever seen. And I don't like it. I hate it. And, it's a clip show. And I've always made the jokes about, oh boy, shades of gray, because in my mind, that is like the bottom of the barrel when it comes to Star. That's like the rip-off, but watching it today, it wasn't that bad. Like, in all honesty, like when I don't know, it's just maybe because when I was a kid, you hate clip shows, and every series had at least one clip show. It felt like everybody had a clip show where they'd be sitting around the fire and telling stories or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I really hated it. And now when I watch it, maybe it's because I knew it was going to be a clip show, so I didn't expect much, but it wasn't. There was a lot more to it than just those clips. It wasn't like 90% clips. It was like 40% or 35%. There was an actual story going on. There was actual, like, a little bit of a progression between the relationship between Troy and Riker. Pulaski had some good moments. Chief O'Brien was there. I mean, we had some story. There was good stuff. And I also thought that the science behind it, the medicine behind it, was actually really interesting. And I took a lot of notes on, like, it's not quite a virus or a bacteria, but it has aspects of both or something like that. And my first thought was, or elements of both, I think it says. And I was like, I wonder if that's even possible, or like if we're aware of something like that on our planet. So hopefully we'll have Dr. Mohammed Noor or Dr. Marie Segal in the free for all that can explain that for us.
I too thought of Dr. Noor watching the episode. As soon as they mentioned the biofilters and the microbes, I was like, "Oh, this is perfect for Dr. Noor. I know he's going to give us some expertise on this." There was good story behind it. Were there issues that I felt watching it? Like, I wish they could have done a little better here, a little better there. I'm always watching, thinking those kinds of things. For example, when Data and Geordi go on the planet's surface to collect the sample of whatever bit Riker, I would think that there would be some kind of containment container to put that thing in, right?
Totally.
You would bring some kind of, I don't know, vial or a box and say, okay, put the sample in there, close it, mark it with the biohazard, and now let's beam back but to hold it like this with tweezers and say, okay, beam me back. I thought that's kind of remedial for Star Trek. I mean, even in today's world, if you're going to go out to the Amazon and collect some kind of species of biology somewhere that is unknown, you wouldn't just put it, hold it in your hand and say, all right, let's go back to the laboratory. You would put it in some kind of thing, and so that it was airtight or sealed and, wasn't able to jump out of your hand or drop on the floor. So I thought that was a small little, And
along those lines, I was thinking why, I thought the same thing of like, Geordi shouldn't be going down there, just Data should. But then Geordi explains it and says, well, I can show you exactly where it was. Okay, that makes sense to me. But then he should be going down in some kind of bodysuit or standing well behind Data and saying, it's over there. See that green thing?
Yeah.
But he's just coming up in it. He's like sniffing it. He's poking around. I was like, come on, like, I get that you got to be there. That makes sense, but you got to be way more careful than that. And I did think it was really cool though. And I watched it like 5 times. I kept rewinding when the vine came at Geordi and Data grabbed it super quick. And I was like trying to rewind it and see if like I could watch Brent Spiner's face anticipating it. Because, you know, when you have to act out something very sudden or quick reaction, sometimes it's hard to hide the anticipation, you know, but there was no anticipation. He played it cool. He was just, you know, in the scene and just reacted really quickly. And I wonder if that took a lot of takes, you know, or if he just nailed it every time. But that was big points for Brent Spiner on that, because I definitely rewound and looked in closely at his performance there.
Yeah, very good performance. Yeah, I mean, Brent is so amazing, you know, throughout this show. I thought he was just, again, amazing in this episode as well. But yeah, and the other little nitpick I had was this medical device that they had to make for this episode, where Riker is in this brain needle thing. I was thinking, is that the most efficient way to get into somebody's head with like 19 needles probed into their head? Wouldn't it be like better to just put like, patches of, like how we do brain scans now with those electrical grid patches and stuff? Wouldn't that make more sense to actually, because I felt like, what if he goes in convulsions?
And then that stuff's just like ripping his head apart. There's like a little miniature saw in his head. It's just wreaking havoc all over his frontal cortex or whatever that is.
Yeah, he's gonna literally rip he's gonna shred his head apart if he goes into some kind of convulsions or cardiac arrest or something. He why would you have this needle set up? I thought that was a little bit too much. It seemed like it would be something that a more primitive technology would develop. So maybe that would be something like, like a Klingon medical chair, like we're tough, we don't care. Well, we'll put needles. But at a Starfleet, 19 needles put on my head. I don't want that. Don't give me that one.
I did find it fun to try to name all of the episodes when the clips started coming. I was like, okay, right away it starts doing like Outpost, the Ferengi episode, Tasha, Geordi, Data, Worf, anybody, he starts. Then there was Encounter at Farpoint where he meets Data. Then there was the flirting scene with Guinan, but I couldn't remember what the title was of that one. Then there was Saying Goodbye to Troy. Then there was Justice, where he's doing the dances and the massage scene with the naked people. And then 11001001, where he meets Minuet and the Binars. So I was kind of having fun with that. And I did kind of catch myself going, wow, there were more episodes in those first 2 seasons than it felt like there were. Because there were all these moments and I was like, oh yeah, I forgot about that. Oh, I forgot about that. And so it makes you realize that in just these 2 short seasons, they actually have done a lot of episodes. They've run the gamut of emotions from comedy to romance and sexuality to seriousness. Riker goes on a Klingon vessel. We deal with Klingons multiple times. There's Vaughn Armstrong in one of those scenes. We've seen Ferengi, I think, 3 times already. Armin Shimmerman playing 2 different characters. I mean, we've actually done a lot in the first 2 seasons. And this episode kind of, in a good way, kind of encapsulates everything in the first 2 seasons and shows us, look at everything we've done and stay tuned for more.
Yeah, I mean, and then, by today's standards, there are now 48 episodes into this show. I mean, that's 5 seasons of any other show. That's 5 seasons of Game of Thrones. That's 5 seasons of any other new show that's out right now. So we've technically been watching 5 seasons of what today's episodes would look like, right? Discovery or any of these shows. So, we've gotten 5 seasons so far, even though it's only season 2. technically we've gotten 5 seasons worth of episodes. And yes, I was reminded by how much we've experienced. The whole flirtation scene with the Irish girl. She's like, "What, you don't like girls?" And I forgot all of these moments when they start flashing back. The one alien that fought Riker, the old man that was really, strong, and he was like wanted him to look inside the box. Those episodes that I had forgotten about really kind of, I was reminded of. But also I was reminded that they should have called this episode Wet Dream, because that's really what it felt like when I was watching.
Yeah, there was a moment that they just kind of kept they're going over like Riker saying, "Hey, how do I do this?" And she says, "You start from the top to the bottom." And then I noticed, I was like, I didn't notice this when we watched that episode, but this time I noticed that he looks at the top of her head and then down to her feet before he reacts. Does he really need to like go, let me examine up there, down there, me likey. Okay, let's do it. But yeah, there were a lot of, there was a lot of that.
It was a lot of, and then what I felt sad for was he's reliving these sexual escapades for the last 2 seasons in this moment, and Troy's got to hold his hand and kind of, she's feeling it too. So it's like he's cheating on her currently, like while she's watching almost. It felt like an even double down of disrespect to Troy. And the other thing that I noticed was Troy didn't have any of those scenes with him. So everybody hooked up with Riker so far, except for Troy.
Yeah, all she got was like the lovey-dovey goodbye stuff. But I will say a couple things to that. Number one is when she was feeling those passionate emotions from him, I wonder if she was thinking, he must be dreaming about me.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too.
I feel the same way as you, Will. Thank you. You're so, yes, we've had very sexy moments together. And he's like, I haven't even reached your scene yet. But
I'm still on the lady in red.
The other thing that was a little weird was when Troy says to Pulaski, she says, Will's emotions are very passionate. Okay. Will's emotions are very passionate. And Pulaski goes, as in erotic? Like, whoa, that's quite a leap. I mean, she guessed correctly, but I'm like, all she said was very passionate. And Pulaski has to take it there. Pulaski's like, erotic? Or what are we talking about? What if she's like, no, I just mean like he's really into the sport that he's watching, or he's really having an argument with somebody. But she's like, Pat must be erotic. Tell me all about it. But she was right. I just thought it was like a weird, quite a jump to go from passionate into erotic from Pulaski.
There would be a line that would easily clear that up if Troy says, well, how do you know it's erotic? And Dr. Pulaski points at his boner and says, well, it's clear.
She's like, enough said.
Enough said. I mean, you can see it right there. There was a moment watching this episode as I was watching, because, Riker now has got the facial hair in this second season. In this episode, he's got that, the way he wears his goatee and his kind of beard trimmed in that way. And then when they flash back, they have him without the beard, kind of the unshaven face. And when he has the unshaven, the shaved face, clean, and he has that little dimple in his chin, right? I didn't notice that before. Yeah, he has that little cleft in his chin. And as I was watching him in the flashback scenes, I thought to myself how much he reminded me of a kind of a leading man that they were looking for, which is this leading man role. And he also reminded me of Christopher Reeves, who played Superman. So there were moments of just the way he plays. I could see young Jonathan Frakes playing Superman if he was cast as at that role. So he definitely has the physique. He has the size. He has the the charm, and he could easily kind of go back and forth between the Clark Kent and this charming, man that he always is. So
that would be amazing. Able to leap over a single backing of a chair in a single bound, right? In a little. Hey, yeah. We're actually going to hit our home run of the episode now. But now you got me picturing Riker in blue tights. I love it. And then sitting on a chair, and then or he straddles a building the same way he straddles a chair. I don't know. Who gets the home run of the episode today?
Yeah. I want to give it to. I'm going to give it to Dr. Pulaski. I don't know if we're going to see her again. I don't know if this is the last time we see her or not. But I do know that I thought she really carried this episode. A lot of medical kind of mumbo jumbo she had to go through and talk through and make it believable and sell me on it. She also sold me on the concern. She sold me on, like when she told Picard, to get out of my hair. She's like, how can I help? So get out of my hair. And she said it in a very loving way and a kind of, nice way. But it was sincere. And it was like, I need to work, let me figure this out. So I would say that I want to give Dr. Pulaski the home run in this.
You know what? I think I agree. Just because it's not easy to say a bunch of, medical stuff and make it sound not just believable, but make it sound like you yourself believe it. Like there was another point where Data says, I hope my hypothesis is true. And I was like, that's a mouthful. Hypothesis is true or accurate or something like that. But she did it throughout the episode. And it worked for me. It sounded like real science to me. And yeah, she's done a lot of work. She's done a lot of heavy lifting over 22 episodes. So yeah, home run of the episode for Dr. Pulaski, Diana Muldaur. Also, yeah. I'm going to bring back the nitpick of the week because I do have one.
Yeah.
When Pulaski and Troy are talking about negative emotions, Troy says, yeah, he's got negative emotions. But I remember very clearly in a future episode of The Next Generation, she tells Reginald Barclay, there's no such thing as negative emotions or positive emotions. They're all regular emotions. It's just what we do with them that are good or bad. So I was very upset about that.
Okay.
I feel better now. I had a lot to get off my chest there.
Good.
But that's true. When they said negative emotions, I was like, wait a second. I remember you saying, please, everybody at home, in the comments below, let us know which episode is that when Troy tells Barclay, I believe, there's no such thing as negative emotions. It's what we do with those emotions that's good or bad, something like that. Shouldn't be too tough. It's a Barclay episode. So also, some other people that have nothing but positive emotions are our friends Homer Frizzell, Dr. Anne-Marie Segal, Eve England out in Wales, Yvette Blackmon-Tom, TJ Jackson Bay out in Missouri, Bill Victor Arukin, our good pal Titus Moeller, Dr. Muhammad Noor, Tierney C. Diekman on a post, Anil O. Palat, Justine Norton Kurtzen, Joe Balsarati, Mike Goo, DQ, Dr. Stephanie Baker, Carrie Schwent, Faith Howell, Edward Foltz, my live from Tokyo, the Matt Boardman, Chris McGee, Justin Weir, Jake Barrett, Jane Jorgensen, Henry Unger, Allison Leach Hyde, Julie Manisfee, Marcia Classic Schreier, Greg K. Wickstrom, Jed Thompson, and of course, Dr. Susan V. Gruner and Jason Okun. All right, everybody, stick around. We've got the free-for-all coming up next. We'll be right back on the Seventh Rule. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Shades of Grey, Seventh Rule style. With Cirroc Lofton, of course.
Hello.
Also joining us today is Malissa Longo, thank goodness.
Hello there.
We've got Dr. Susan V. Gruner. Jason Okun's got his cool poster in the background. Dr. Marie Segal is going to teach us about medicine, probably. We've got Allison Leach-Hyde wearing an awesome Abyssinian kiosk shirt. Chris McGee's hanging out. He's going to drop some knowledge, I'm sure. Mai is live in Tokyo. She's going to be in and out, I'll just bet. We've got the return of the board queen, Tierney C. Diekman. We've got the classic one, Marcia Schreier. Faith Howell is on the bridge of the Enterprise D. We've got the party Gorn, TJ Jackson Bay out in Missouri. We've got the Matt Boardman and Carrie Schwent, aka Crafty Bear. We've got Greg Kenzo wearing an awesome shirt from Malissa Longo. You can get that at the Introverted Republic. Oh boy, you guys. First things first. Jake Sisko guesses the IMDb score. You are in for a treat today.
I saw this one.
Whoa. I don't know. Let's see. Let's see. Hey, flashback episode.
Good science talk. Great Pulaski moments. What do you think?
Honestly, I don't even know. Because there were so many flashbacks in this, I can't tell you how they graded it. But I'm going to say 7, just to play it safe. I'm going to go with a straight 7.
That's a safe bet. Does anybody else have any guesses as to what it was scored on IMDb that doesn't already have an idea?
Does it go into the negatives?
Can I pull a TJ and say
I think
$1?
Q space in Greg's background is an appropriate response.
I'm going to say 3.
We'll go with Patrick Ewing.
I know this one.
We'll go with Patrick Ewing, but his number, not his height.
4.7.
Wow.
Ooh, Star Trek number.
I often wonder when we do these episodes because a lot of us go in and rate them, if it actually is enough to change the rating.
Hope so.
But because in this case, if enough of us went in and tend it, we might have actually upped it for what it was. But I remember what it was when I went into it, and if I recall, it is still the lowest rated episode on IMDb of at least the next gen and TOS era Treks. I don't know about any new Trek, if any Discoveries get that low or anything like that, but it's bad. It's real bad.
Wow.
So does anybody else have any guesses?
I see a 3.2 on the board. I'm going to say 3.3.
Wow.
Jeez.
These guys are ruthless. It is nowhere near that. It is the lowest rated Star Trek episode ever by like 2 points. I believe, it is a 3.3.
No
TJ, was that you?
Loop, TJ.
Wow.
That was TJ.
Yeah, look at that.
Ever?
Faith with a 3 point. Yeah.
Okay,
By
so
a lot.
we didn't raise the score.
I think some people looked at it.
By a lot. But I think you guys, I think maybe this deserves a revisit to that IMDb score. And I think people should maybe reconsider their voting, because I sure did upon viewing this. However, did we have any non-appearance mentions? I feel like everybody appeared in the clips.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Malissa Longo, please get us off on the right track here. Mm-hmm. Oh, your picture's a little gray.
A little bit. It matches my shirt, which is great. Yeah. Get it off on the right foot. Actually, I'm surprised that this has the lowest rating of all of the Star Trek episodes ever. I would have thought that Code of Honor would have been much lower. I thought it would have tanked, but because it had some really good moments in it. For me, it had a lot of good moments. There was a mystery, it started out with a mystery. and a problem to solve. And I like that Pulaski and Troy are the ones that are trying to solve this problem together, of saving Will Riker's life. And that's interesting to me. And there was, and then you have Chief O'Brien at the beginning and making funny jokes, saying, I think I remember the coordinates. So yeah, it's always good to see O'Brien. And at the very end, the last scene where Riker says, of course I know who I am. I am Jean-Luc Picard, captain of the USS Enterprise. And Picard says, I'm delighted that you're feeling better, Captain. The Admiral and I were worried about you. And then Data Jackson with his, I didn't know you had that authority. That was really cute. And then the moment when Pulaski and Troy figured out where they kind of almost embrace, that was a special moment to me. And and I also wanted to give a shout out to Marina Sirtis, because I feel like that she hasn't been given the best work to work with, the best material to work with, but she's always committed to her character. She always brings some kind of substance to maybe some shallow writing. So kudos to her. And I feel that Troy's concern for Riker stems from a genuine place. So yeah. And I do have things left unsaid.
Excellent. Great stuff. Thank you very much, Malissa Longo, with the gray shirt. Everybody's shirt is gray right now. Dr. Susan V. Gruner, what's up? What did you think of this masterpiece? Be honest.
I completely forgot about this episode. And then when it got in a little bit, I thought, oh my God, those flashbacks from what's the name of the episode with the scantily clad people?
Justice.
It made me, I was laughing so hard. I literally hurt my stomach. I was laughing so hard. I thought, what the hell? What happened? Do we know why was there a strike or something? Why did they go with all? Is that what the reason was?
It was to save money because they had done like the Borg episodes and other things. So it's like a popular misconception that this one was a strike one.
Well, I wondered I knew something had to have been going on for them to resort to doing what they did. So I laughed a lot, and then I watched the rest, and I thought, oh my God, I'm never going to watch this one ever again as long as I live.
Well, that's too bad. We were hoping to cover it again next week. Thanks very much, Dr. Susan V. Gruner.
I'm sorry to be so negative.
Not at all. Jason Okun is also here, everybody, and he read the entire script. He said it was 11 pages long. What did you think of this one?
Interesting enough, it was not 11 pages long. They managed to put all the clip scenes right into the script. I don't know for what reason.
Oh.
So the script actually is thicker than it usually is because there's a lot of descriptive information here. Although it made it easier to flip because they do name the scenes. I think the only kind of great thing about this episode is that you can watch it in about 20 minutes. If you fast forward everything, just like you can flip pages. Certainly, they ran out of money and they had to do something. And frankly, this is, strictly speaking, I guess the second clip show for Star Trek. The first one was amazing simply because they've utilized the cage so well. I mean, some people don't even call it a clip show, but in a way it is. And the envelope is interesting, and it gives you something to look at. It's probably one of the better episodes of the original series. This is sort of certainly a nadir of the second season, I think. Nothing is even close. And to me, frankly, I mean, I understand the financial constraints, the timing constraints, but to me, it's just a failure of imagination. Even the clips that they've chosen are not the best. Sometimes they don't fit what they're trying to show. So there's that piece of it as well. We do not need to revisit some of the worst parts of the first two seasons. I understand it may have been slim pickings, but what they decided to choose was not great. And I can go on for a while, and I'll save quite a bit of it for later. I'll say a couple of things that are actually somewhat positive here. One is Diana Muldaur's performance. It's the last time we see her, and she's giving it her all, even though I think everybody understands what kind of nonsense they're doing here. She's really into it. Kind of reminded me of, in a way, that Shatner was throwing himself completely into those horrible scripts at the end of the Star Trek run. So it kind of gave me those types of flashbacks. She's really sort of going, and she probably had the meatiest part of them all here. If there's anything in this episode, I think Rob Bowman did whatever he could. I think there were only 2 camera setups on the planet set. Obviously, they had a little bit in the transporter room, and the rest of it is in sickbay setups. I mean, obviously they tried to do this in 3 days. So right. as much as they could do. I think he milked quite more from the sickbay scenes than probably had any right to. I mean, they did use Ron Jones's music. To my ear, it seemed like a lot of it was just basic old music that was just put together. I don't know if there's any new music for this one. Probably wasn't. So it was kind of a quickie, and again, I guess they had to put out an episode, and they did, but maybe it would have been better not to.
Wow. Scathing. All right. Thank you very much for that, Mr. Jason Okun. All right, Dr. Anne-Marie Segal, we mentioned you earlier because there's a lot of science and medicine. So we're like, hopefully we get Mohammed or Anne-Marie in this free-for-all. What did you think of this particular episode?
Okay, so what some call nonsense, I would call ages ahead of its time neurosurgery. I think it's so brilliant. So when I saw this episode already, I thought it was so interesting in that scene where Riker's head is in that frame and they're sticking needles in him. That just really sticks with you from a horror perspective, but also wow, that's fascinating. How are they localizing where the needle goes? So when I was in my neurosurgery rotation, one of my first cases was being in the OR for a deep brain stimulation, which at that time was a new treatment for Parkinson's disease. And basically it's done the exact same way. I mean, no empath is standing there, but instead you have the deep brain stimulation is hooked up to your brain waves. And as they're sticking the needle in, it moves the brain waves to show you where in the brain it is. And the frame actually is keeping everything in place so that you can do this very specific localization. So to me, I think this is actually one of my favorite science episodes, for that reason. And also just the pathology of the bite that Riker, I guess you'd call it a bite, that Riker gets and how that progresses. I just think it's brilliant. And, even different feelings have different neurotransmitters, and that can be localized to different parts of the brain and cause different things. So I love that. And I think Dr. Pulaski is such a wonderful, underrated doctor of Star Trek. And this episode really makes me feel even before we knew that this was the last one she'd appear in, I remember seeing it at the time thinking you know what, after all these episodes, I'm going to miss her. And so I just think it's great. And it's wonderful to see 2 women of science working together and figuring out a problem. And I love this episode. Also, it was the 20th century and there were clip shows and everything. And I would say this is a really great one. And I think Eric did such a great job choosing the clips, with a week lead time running up to it and just having VHSs to scroll through. I thought it was brilliant. And I mean, it has the hottest montage ever. And when I watched it originally, my dad used to go like this to me and my sister's eyes. And this Riker montage got so much hand over eyes action. It's just super fun. And it's also super fun seeing everybody's background because I actually watched TNG in black and white. And the second I saw everybody's change, I was no, it's how I originally saw it. You have to say this show does look great in black and white.
Hey, real quick, Anne-Marie, before we move on, not a bacteria, not a virus, but with elements of both. Is that something that exists here on this planet?
I was going to ask that.
Thank you.
Yes. And there are a lot of different diseases where there can be elements of different, a parasite in a virus or a parasite in bacteria. And that's just what we know about.
Interesting. All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Anne-Marie Segal. I also noticed Dr. Sue was nodding her head as well. Oh, you tend it. I'm going to revisit it too because I thought it was the worst thing I'd ever seen when I was a kid. But upon watching it today, I was it's not that bad. But it's probably because I had low expectations. Yeah. Well, look, Allison Leach-Hyde is here. What is up with you, Allison? And what did you think of this episode?
Hello. What do I think of this episode? I had to watch it twice. I fell asleep the first time. It's not one that was on a lot as a kid, so it's relatively new. I only got on rewatching as an adult. What I do really like about it is Frakes does a lovely job of being the commander, and like, I'm going through this very hard thing. I'm dying, but I can still teach everyone under my command how to do this with Frakes. And I thought he did a wonderful job of showing that. And as someone who has also gone through a fairly sudden medical issue where it was not a pleasant situation, it is something you think about, like, okay, no, I want to show that, yes, this is scary, but I can still be me while I go through it. He still has his twinkle in his eye. He's still cracking jokes. And I really appreciated that. I thought that was lovely, and he did a great job. And I also really liked getting a little bit of Geordi and Data having their friendship down on the planet. And Geordi's like, have to rely on your quick reflexes of like, okay, at least there's some fun in this episode too, even though it is slow. It prods along. But, it's something I will probably skip on rewatches from now on. But there are pleasant things about it, even though it's not terribly exciting. And of course, it's lovely also to see, as Lisa said, getting Troy and Pulaski having good working relationships and working through a problem together and saving the day. And so that's also quite enjoyable.
Mm-hmm. Great stuff. Thank you very much, Allison Leach-Hyde. All right, Chris McGee is like, Ryan, you stole my fucking question. What have you got for us today? I'm sorry for doing that.
And I had so few notes to begin with here. So yeah, I'll start with a little bit of a confession. I haven't seen a whole lot of shows back in the 80s and 90s. I wasn't into television back then. I didn't even watch TNG until much later in the late 90s when I had to rent it from a video store. So I haven't seen, clip show episodes from other shows of this era. So I don't know if it's typical to have a frame story kind of like this. Perhaps I'm almost certain I'm in the minority here, but I think this kind of method of having a story to explain why we're seeing these clips is at least halfway decent, especially given the circumstances. After all, the clips don't even begin until a third of the way, like 16 minutes into the episode. So you don't even know it's a clip show until you're already sucked in. I will say, even O'Brien gets a chance to shine in this episode. I'm convinced this episode probably would have been rated on IMDb 1.2 if it were not for Miles 2. O'Brien here to help lift it up. Anyway, one little note that I saw that just I'm kind of curious about is during, of course, all the rapid fire clips there towards the end, we see one little short clip from Conspiracy that was, of course, the gory scene that was in that episode censored or even removed entirely. I don't know which in the UK. I'm wondering if this episode, Shades of Grey, was also censored similarly to that. Like Jason, I enjoyed Ron Jones's music, even if it is just recycled. It's fine. Ron Jones is fantastic with his music. Not any non-appearance mentions. There are plenty of non-mention appearances. Too many to go into, like Minuet, Mistress Beata, and so forth and so on. But as for my memorable quote of the episode, the obvious ones I'm sure you've already touched upon in the earlier segment, so I'll pick one that isn't quite as memorable, I guess, and that is, facing death is the ultimate test of character.
Mm-hmm. Great stuff. Thank you very much, Chris McGee. All right. Faith Howell is here on the bridge of the Enterprise D. What's up, Faith? What did you think of this one?
So, as a child of the 80s and 90s, I grew up with episodes like this from probably just about every series that I watched at the time. And so, yeah, I guess I've bought into everybody's complaints about them recently, but watching it, I didn't hate it as much as I thought I was going to. I didn't remember the story piece, the frame, as Chris dubbed it. And so I kind of enjoyed that bit, and that's some of the clip shows that I do remember from other shows like Castle, especially. That's been some of my favorite pieces. That it's nice sometimes to be able to go back and see these touch points and remember where you've been and relive some of the better moments. I don't know that it was a great choice to do as the season finale, but I don't know what was going on in the writers' room at that time either, and what choices they had to make for budgeting or whatever the reason was. But I think overall it's not nearly as bad as I expected it to be. And I liked going back and seeing all those memories.
Yeah, it's funny when we expect it to be terrible. That's when we go, that's not so bad. Thanks very much, Faith. What's up, Marcia? Classic Schreier. What did you think of this particular episode? Did you love it?
I loved the fact that it finally ended season 2, which, as you all know, is not my favorite. But it wasn't, rewatching it for the first time in many, many, many years today. It wasn't as bad as I remembered it. And I'd be anxious to see what everybody thinks of this episode compared to Spock's brain when we get to that, because that was always considered, one of the worst Trek episodes ever. A lot of people have said things that I was going to say, and I've been crossing off notes. In terms of the clips, I was surprised that they didn't use Icarus Factor or Measure of a Man, because those were, the fights that Riker had with his father in Icarus Factor probably would have knocked out those neurons, in 5 minutes. And Measure of a Man, he was, so emotional, especially the scene where he's taking out Data's arm. To me, those were obvious. The ones they used were like episodes I never wanted to see again anyway. My understanding is the reason for this clip show is because Q-Who earlier in the season went double budget. And because the writer's strike was at the beginning of the year, they didn't have enough scripts left over that they could film. I don't know. Jason probably knows better than me. But that's my understanding, that they had, nothing to work with, basically. I also love the O'Brien line. I hope these are the right coordinates. But kudos to Jonathan Frakes, who really did a lot with not much. And I loved his grandfather and the snake story. That's all I got.
Great stuff. That snake, that was a good story. That was the Chuck Norris joke of the week. Thank you very much, Marcia. Tierney C. Diekman has returned. Looks like she's drinking out of her Voyager mug. That's pretty cool. What did you think of this episode? Pretty great, right?
It wasn't as bad as I recalled it. It's really easy to give into the hype of a clip show. They're often ridiculed. And actually, I looked up, just for the heck of it, when the first instance of a clip show TV show happened. And back, I think, 30s, 40s, not 30s, 40s, that seems way too early, but way the heck back when, like Three Stooges started doing it. And especially, when there wasn't a whole lot of syndication and replays and things like that, it was a great way to help audiences that didn't start at the beginning and weren't, really familiar with things, to remember what had happened or get an idea of things that went on. So the concept, wasn't exactly new. And the funny thing is going through at least the Wikipedia article, this episode is specifically mentioned as a reason for a clip show due to budget constraints. So there's a little excerpt in the Wikipedia article about clip shows for Shades of Grey, and as Anne-Marie brought up, they had dubbed it during the writing process Riker's Brain, and almost had considered calling the episode that, which is hilarious as opposed to Spock's Brain, but I do believe that is rated considerably higher on IMDb than this. So it's kind of gotten a bad rap over time, and I wonder if it's a bit of a hive mind sort of, it's a clip show, it must be terrible. When the framing story, which I'd also forgotten until rewatching this, is actually pretty darn interesting. And I'm really glad, like, all the things that you, Anne-Marie, and Allison brought up are in my notes too, because the science and the life and death and the medical, I just had to deal with that myself with my own operation of, hey, the risks for this are super high and were terrifying. I love his approach to it of, I'm going to go out with my boots on if I have to. I'm still going to be myself and might as well laugh about it because why the heck not? And then is just silly as it was because he's still twitching the whole time, but the neural stimulation is, at least some of the research into it is something I'm semi-familiar with as a potential treatment with epilepsy myself. So it was just kind of like, I want more of this. I really wish they had been able to just do away with the clips, which could have been better choices, more from Riker's point of view, less Riker Lady Fest. And I love how he had 2 terrible memories of people dying, and then the rest of his bad memories just started with him getting his ass handed to him. So, like, that was great. But it, I would have liked to have known more about the organism in his leg, you know, how the holofilters couldn't filter it out, you know, have a parasitic entity, have a bottle episode in sickbay with Pulaski. This is her last episode. We didn't know that at the time, or the viewers didn't at the time. It's a really great point to bring up, but she was phenomenal. I really liked her. I liked her as an actor, and she and Troy worked beautifully in that episode. Their performances are great given what they had to work with. I just wanted to know more of what was going on with them. How are they, again, pinpointing the spots, you know, to find this, learn more about the neurotransmitters affecting his emotions. What is Troy feeling from him? Create scenes of them together in his past before he was on the Enterprise with her. Good memories, bad memories, their breakup, their time together. More about that, and just keep it constrained in the sickbay and have it be a new entity that they discover within Riker that is using him. They could have done something with that at the time, and I don't know, maybe just with writing and strikes it wasn't possible and nobody thought about that. So it makes me a little sad that they couldn't do something with that, you know, as I say, 30 years down the line. But it wasn't as bad as I remember. It was actually just laughable of, oh my God, every single one of his good memories is just another lady, another conquest coming in, and another cringy episode at another terrible point. And I don't envy, I can't remember his name now, who the consultant that had to go in and pick
Eric
apart.
Stillwell.
Thank you.
Yeah. Our guest from earlier today, in fact.
Episodes. Yeah, and do that. That must have been excruciating. Like, after a while, he probably was just like, yeah, this could be better, but I don't care. Like, but yeah, there's a lot more that could be said, but overall, it deserves better than a 3.3. It really does. We can do better than that, guys. There are worse. We know there are worse. We all know there are worse. They're coming. They're coming up fast.
Scary.
Yeah.
Well, lucky for us, we don't have worse coming up. It's all great people all the time in our free-for-alls. Thank you very much, Tierney. Greg Kenzo is a great example of that. What's up, Greg? What do you think of this one?
What's up? This one started off well. I was like doing my regular thing. I was like, oh, okay, this is a fascinating premise, you know, with the tree that like spikes people. And then I was like, wait, what? And then it was clip show. And I was like, okay. You know, it gave me some time to not gonna lie, I just watched this one recently and I had forgot it was a clip show. So that's kind of what tells you that it's not the most memorable one. Let's see. I did get a philosophy from the beginning of the episode. Like I said before, I do like kind of extracting a philosophy from these, so bear with me on this. Riker, let's see. Riker says, drop a hammer on your foot. It's hardly useful to get mad at the hammer. Right? And that's kind of, they also go on to say, or Picard says, these things happen when Riker's in the chair, or not chair. He's on the table. And then Riker says, I'm surprised they don't happen more often. After all, we are. And I was like, yeah, well, I was thinking that right when the episode started. I was like, why doesn't this happen more often? They're going down to like alien planets. Half the things on our planet, or maybe not half, but the animals on our planet have ways that they can kill you with like defensive lethality. So it would make sense that these alien planets have species with that same thing. Anyway, so I focused on that, but after hearing what everybody had to say about the clip show, it actually is done really well. Like they integrate it into the story. Australia is, yes, full of animals that can kill you. And so it would make sense that you would have different Australias in, like, I don't know, name a planet that Star Trek they go to. Anyway, yeah. Not the best episode, but maybe it's not a 3.3. I would probably give it. I won't say what I'll give it, but
thank you. Well, thanks very much, Greg. Good stuff as always. Mai is live in Tokyo. What do you think of this one, Mai? What's up?
Barely alive. Can you guys see me okay?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Okay, cool. My internet is weird this morning. So my thoughts on this: nobody likes a clip episode, especially aficionados of Friends, where it's just abused with reckless abandon. But that's not my main thought about this episode. And love you, Emery, but I got to disagree. The science on this was just complete nonsense. It evokes memories of my first year in college about 100 years ago. I decided to formally study pharmacology, having just graduated from 4 years of intense, ungraded, focused pharmacology lab work, aka high school in Berkeley in the late 70s. So in this episode, they try to stimulate negative brain endorphins to crush the virus. First of all, endorphins are present throughout the body in both the peripheral and central nervous systems, and they're neither good nor bad. They just exist. In the peripheral nervous system, they block pain. In the central nervous system, they allow extra dopamine and hence lots of joyous feelings. Now, look at the term endorphin itself. It's derived from two words, endogenous and morphine, or in other words, morphine produced in the body. So if they really wanted to fix Riker, they would have simply needed to grab a hypo spray of morphine rather than the nonsense with the dreams. In fact, if they really wanted a quick-acting solution, they could have used heroin, which breaks down into two types of morphine in the blood and which crosses what's called the blood-brain barrier, or a sort of fence that protects the brain, about 35 times faster than morphine due to this really cool property called lipophilicity, or the ability to dissolve lipids in lipids rather than water, which is a neat trick. If only someone would reverse that process and sell it in a cream I could rub on selected parts of my body before a shower, just wash the fat away, I'd be a size 10 in no time at all. Come on, science, make it happen. And even if they did use these potent drugs, they could clear up any associated addiction by doing whatever they did in the Neutral Zone episode to fix Sonny Clemens. So some atrociously bad science this episode put me off far more than the clips of the past episodes, and that takes some doing. So on to season 3 is what I say.
Ooh, that is exciting. We've been waiting for season 3 for quite some time, and it's almost here. Our time is finally near. Isn't that right, TJ Jackson Bay out in Missouri? What do you think of this episode?
That is right. That is right. I have faith of the heart. My time is finally near. It's been so long. I enjoyed this episode. I've never had, all of these strongly expressed feelings about it. I've always enjoyed it. It's an episode of Star Trek, and I like Star Trek. So there's that. Watching today, I really appreciated, and I think Allison and Greg kind of touched on Commander Riker's attitude about what was going on. And we just, got finished watching an episode where Commander Riker's joviality and his command style are discussed. And, we see that's the core of who he is, because he's willing to go down that way and continue to teach. Like it's not a show. It's not a put on, and it's not something he does because he takes his job lightly. He takes it seriously, and he's teaching, his crew to, how to deal with all the crazy stuff that they encounter. And that, you don't have to be, upset and depressed or mad about it. Like I said about the hammer, if you it's not going to get mad at the hammer. It didn't do anything. Like it's just doing what hammers do. It fail. It's heavy. It hurts if it falls on you. And I also appreciate, his line about most life forms acting out of an instinct for survival and not out of malice. And so, he didn't feel like the plant hated him or the planet was trying to kill him or any of those things. And he also wasn't mad about it. And so, I think that there's a lesson in that, at least for me. And even in dealing with people, most people also are only trying to act in their best interest. I don't think anybody wakes up in the morning and say, I want to be the worst. Everybody probably just, is trying to do the best they can or just trying to get by. And, wherever we find them and encounter them, no matter what our interaction is, that's usually what most people are doing. And I feel that I can connect with people better, even when there's a misunderstanding or conflict, when I approach it from that angle that, they're just doing, just trying to get by, just trying to survive, just like everybody else. And so, I feel appreciation that that's Commander Riker's approach in life. I also think that the memories that they brought up kind of show us, who he is. And, for the obvious non-story reasons, we didn't, see much of him before he came on the ship. Or, obviously there are a lot of more emotional moments, that he went through, and we've heard about some of them. But I think these memories kind of, really start to show us who he is. We mentioned the kind of ladies man, moments, the things that maybe, he found pleasure and enjoyed. And then, we see like some of the things that kind of scared him. So, that helps us to know that, okay, this guy can be scared. He has strong emotions about it. And we have Deanna to sit there and narrate to us what the emotions are, just kind of interesting and, not something that we encounter in this world. I don't think anybody's going to be by my bedside saying what I'm dreaming about and saying if I'm having a good time or a bad time. But that's, it's interesting to see that, and interesting to see that they were able to use that to help fix the problem. Because, her telling Dr. Pulaski, what he's going through and seeing the results of how it's affecting these, microorganisms, was instrumental in curing him. So, I thought the episode was interesting. I actually also even enjoyed the clips.
Yep. Most of them. Thanks very much, TJ, Jackson Bay out, Missouri, the Party Gorn, Carrie Schwent, a.k.a. Crafty Bear. What's up with you? What did you think of this episode?
I enjoy clip shows. I don't hate them as much as some people do. One of my favorite episodes of Dr. Quinn is a clip show. It's the one they do right before Mike and Sully get married. They're having their premarital counseling and they're going through all the steps that they went through to get to the wedding. And I love that. and we have a nice bit of a micro romantic scene with Riker and Deanna. Every time Imzadi comes out, it warms my heart. I love that, just that tiny little moment between the two of them. This does not deserve a 3.3. I will defend that one. It's a 9. Darn it.
Whoa.
Yeah,
I was with you when you said not a 3.3, but when you said a 9, it kind of took me back. Sorry, please continue.
I'm sorry. I liked it. Some of the clips were a lot of fun. It's got they included probably one of my favorite scenes from the first 2 seasons. Makes me laugh out loud every time, with Riker and Guinan and them sort of play acting and making Wesley squirm. That scene will make me laugh for absolutely forever. And I very much enjoy when Riker and Data first meet on the holodeck in that first episode. I think it's a great scene between the two of them. I have a note on that's something I noticed, but I'll save that for later. And I came up with the idea a little while back of what to do for the limerick for this episode. And Melissa already knows, and she sort of guessed when we were talking before. I'm going to attempt to cover my camera for a moment because it sort of contains a little Easter egg as to what the limerick will contain. And we'll see if you guys can figure out the craziness that my brain created. It can be fun to try something new. A Klingon's heart beats only for glory. Suddenly your eyes meet. 1010. It's time to give the ship a reprieve. All kinds of big stuff, just like the episode. And
yeah, that was
all kinds of fun stuff can come from that.
That was a limerick clip show right there. Good stuff.
A Climerick.
Easy, Cirroc. That was a close one.
Wow.
Well done, sir.
I'm going to have to write that down.
Yeah. Well, thanks very much, Carrie. I agree with you. Clip shows are the best. And I will say, Matt Boardman, tell me if you agree. My favorite clip show episode, the final episode of Deep Space Nine. What do you think? And what do you think of this episode? It is a clip show.
There are some clips. Yes, indeed. So watching the episode today, I had this come to mind, and I good, give in to your hate. You, young Riker, like your father, are now mine. Sorry, I'm special in the head. It's so interesting to me to, because having watched this episode in a time in which we didn't have the internet, and as time has gone on, the advent of the internet and more people discussing this stuff, I was surprised to find so many people who don't like this episode, because I do. I think that it's a fun episode. I love the clips. There are some clips in there that are among my favorite moments from the first season. I don't know why, but I do. I love when Riker meets Data for the first time on the holodeck. I don't know. I think it's, it was wonderful to watch that interaction, that in its innocence in a way, and it's just to be reminded of the beginning of that friendship there. I love seeing. Yeah, I mean, yes, we do. We do tend to focus on some of Riker's romances and everything like that. But I couldn't help but feel like, as I saw a comment from Eric Stillwell about his feelings on this episode, and they were very strongly not happy. At least what was quoted, and I think that for those of us who are creatives, I think it is so easy to be very critical of our own work. I know, at least for myself, I look at stuff and I'm just like, oh my gosh, that is just hot garbage, like nobody's going to like that or whatever. And so if Eric is listening to this, I would like to just say to him, this episode was not as bad as you think it is. It actually, I think it had a fun premise, and given the restraints that were there at this point in time, put upon you by the studio. I mean, look, when the studio speaks, you really don't have much of a choice but to follow that. And so given those restraints, I think that this was an effective use of that creative power that you had available to you.
It's good stuff. Thank you very much, the Matt Boardman, or as our good buddy Scott Jensen calls you, Classic the Matt. All right. Jake's final take. Cirroc, what do you think? There's so much more to say about this episode. What do you say?
Yeah, there's a lot to say, and it's great that everybody has so much to say about such a crappy episode. It's kind of interesting to me that there's so much to say. So let me say, I wanted to give a little props to the props, and there was a device, medical device, looked like a gyroscope of some sort.
Yeah,
I thought that was a cool. I thought that was a cool medical device. Whoever designed it, came up with it. Props to them. In the props department. So I wanted to say shout out to them really quickly. Also, the idea of this plant that is carnivorous. I mean, if you eat this plant, are you still a vegetarian? Or does that cross the rules? I thought that would be something to explore as well. Interesting
Like
kind of
figs.
idea. Yes. Just plants eating animals. I thought, wow, that's pretty interesting. Like, you never hear that.
I can answer that. If you eat the plant, you're safe as long as the plant has not eaten in 24 hours. But if the plant has eaten in 24 hours, you are eating its leftover rhino and or something.
I don't know about that one. I think there's a challenge for that. But let's just, I think it raises the question, definitely sparked a little bit of interest in my mind. Another thing I want to give credit to for this show, they essentially killed Tasha Yar last season and still have brought her up many times, even up until the new show. They still brought her, keep referring to her. And I give credit to Star Trek for doing that, because in most cases, when they do get rid of a character on a show, they don't refer to them anymore. They try to ignore them. They try to forget about them. But to their credit, they have continuously brought Tasha Yar back and kept reminding us of the times that she spent on that bridge. So I want to give props for that as well. Also, I believe that Troy has a real unconditional love for Riker. She doesn't judge him. She doesn't give him a hard time for whatever she knows that he's doing. She's accepting of him however he is. And that is a real kind of open relationship that was not really a common thing at that time. It's something that's more common now, people having kind of more open relationships. But I feel like the way she loves Riker is particularly special. And I felt that love in this episode when she was kind of, by his side on the medical table. So kudos to her for just really having a genuine love for Riker and showing that. And lastly, I just wanted to agree with TJ on his takeaway line. I felt like it was one of the big takeaway lines for me as well. And that is, most life forms act out of an instinct for survival. And I feel like we see that playing out all around the world, just in different conflicts and circumstances. People are trying to have this instinct for survival, and it causes actions, whether you agree with them or not. And I think that's a big takeaway for me. It seemed like a truth that resonated with me when I heard it spoke in this episode. So those are my final takes on this this 3.3, which I don't think it deserved a 3.3, because I feel like I've seen worse episodes than this. But I didn't walk away from this episode saying this is the worst episode I've ever seen.
Right.
It wasn't the greatest, but I didn't feel that when I watched it. So I don't think it was really deserving of that. Maybe it was kind of a knee-jerk reaction because people wanted more, but it wasn't that bad.
Mm-hmm. Instinct for survival, not malice. That's what it was. It's a good line.
Mm-hmm.
And the Chuck Norris line was really good too. But anyway, thanks very much, everybody. We got to run. Thank you to Malissa Longo, Dr. Susan B. Gruner, Jason Okun, Dr. Anne-Marie Segal, Allison Leach Hyde. We've got Chris McGee, Greg Kenzo, Tierney C. Diekman, Marcia Classic Schreier, Faith Howell, Carrie Schwent, The Matt Boardman, Classic The Matt, TJ Jackson Bay. Send a prayer his way. He's a Memphis Grizzlies fan at the moment. And my live in Tokyo. It's a rough season so far.
The Grizzlies are suspended.
Yeah. For myself, for Cirroc, for Malissa Longo and Aaron Eisenberg, something's got me. We'll see you next time. Thank you for tuning in, and always remember the 7th rule.